I gripped the helicopter's safety harness as we descended through thick Arctic clouds, my knuckles white against the black nylon. The cabin rattled around us, metal groaning against the wind. Colonel Harrison sat across from me, his voice barely audible over the roar of the rotors. "Research Station Echo went dark 36 hours ago," he said, leaning forward. "Last transmission was a distress call, cut off mid-sentence. Your team goes in, assesses the situation, retrieves any critical research, and extracts survivors." "What kind of research?" I asked. Harrison's face gave nothing away. "Climate studies, ice core analysis, nothing that should cause this kind of blackout." I nodded, though something in his tone made me wonder if he was holding back. I glanced around at my team, each man focused on their pre-mission rituals. Jay Newman sat directly across from me, methodically breaking down his rifle for what must have been the third time since takeoff. His fingers moved with practiced precision, wiping down each component before reassembling it. The familiar click-clack of metal parts was oddly reassuring against the helicopter's uneven rhythm. "Weather report says this storm's about to get worse," Jay said without looking up. 40 below with the wind chill. Joel McCarthy hunched over his communications gear, adjusting dials and checking connections. His headphones covered one ear while he kept the other free to monitor our conversation. "Radio interference is crazy out here," Joel said, frustration evident in his voice. "Getting nothing but static and ghost signals. Might be the storm, might be something else." Wesley Simon had his thermal imaging equipment spread across his lap, carefully checking each component. His face looked pale in the dim light of the cabin. "This cold plays hell with the sensors," Wesley said. "Calibrated them 3 times already." Cameron Warner had maps spread across his knees, tracing routes with his finger while consulting his GPS unit. His brow furrowed in concentration. "Station's built on a peninsula of solid ice," Cameron said, "surrounded by pressure ridges on 3 sides. Only one good approach from our landing zone." Lieutenant Kingston Ortiz stood near the cockpit, leaning into the small opening to confer with our pilot. He turned back toward me, giving a short nod. "Stewart says we've got maybe 10 minutes before this gets too rough for a safe landing," Kingston reported. I looked past him to catch a glimpse of Mildred Stewart, her hands steady on the controls as she fought to keep us level. The helicopter lurched suddenly, dropping several feet before stabilizing. My stomach clenched as I tightened my grip on the harness. The clouds parted below us, revealing an endless expanse of white. The landscape stretched out like a blank page, broken only by jagged ice formations that cast long blue shadows across the snow. In the distance, I could make out the dark line where ice met water, the Arctic Ocean, still partially unfrozen despite the season. "Visibility dropping fast," Mildred called back from the cockpit. "Storm fronts moving in quicker than forecast." I checked my watch, 14:30 hours. Daylight was already fading, though it was hard to tell where the gray sky ended and the white ground began. "Can't hold position much longer, Captain," Mildred shouted as the helicopter bucked against another gust. "Need to put down now or we abort." I made the call. "Prepare for deployment, full Arctic gear, weapons check." My team moved with practiced efficiency, pulling on insulated gloves and securing equipment. Jay chambered a round in his rifle and nodded at me. Joel tucked extra battery packs into his inner pockets where body heat would keep them functioning. Wesley secured his thermal scanner to his chest rig, while Cameron folded his maps into waterproof pouches. The helicopter descended rapidly, snow swirling up around us as Mildred fought to keep us stable. The landing skids hit hard, bouncing once before settling onto packed ice with a crunch that reverberated through the frame. "Go, go, go!" I shouted, sliding open the side door. A blast of frigid air hit us like a physical blow. My team filed out quickly, dropping into crouches on the ice as they secured our perimeter. I was last out, pausing only to confirm details with Mildred. 48 hours, she said, her face grim behind her flight helmet. "I'll be back at this exact spot. If you're not here, I'll make one sweep along your approach vector before I have to bug out." "Understood," I said. "Weather gets worse." "I know the drill, Captain Marquez." She cut me off with a tight smile. You worry about your team. I'll be here when you need extraction. I jumped down onto the ice, the cold instantly seeping through my boots despite the insulation. The helicopter's rotors were already speeding up as I joined my men, the engine pitch rising to a scream against the wind. Mildred didn't waste time with goodbyes. The helicopter lifted off immediately, banking hard into the wind before disappearing into the low clouds within seconds. The sudden silence felt oppressive, broken only by the howling of the approaching storm. "Form up," I ordered, pulling my scarf over my face. "Warner, take point. Newman, rear guard." We moved in single file through snow that reached mid-calf in places. Each step required effort, and I could already feel sweat forming under my layers. A dangerous condition in these temperatures. The wind cut through our gear like tiny knives, finding every seam and gap. Cameron led us forward, checking his GPS every few minutes to confirm our heading. Visibility had dropped to less than 50 yards, the air filled with swirling snow that stung any exposed skin. The light was fading fast, the gray sky darkening to a dull lead color that made depth perception difficult. After 20 minutes of trudging through deepening snow, I pulled my thermal scope from its case and scanned ahead. The white landscape appeared as varying shades of blue and black in the viewfinder, temperature differences barely registering in the uniform cold. Then I saw it, a rectangular shape, darker than its surroundings, showing heat loss despite being powered down. I adjusted the focus, confirming what I was seeing. "Station ahead," I announced, pointing toward what was still invisible to the naked eye. 300 yards, bearing 020. We altered course slightly. As we got closer, the outline of Research Station Echo gradually materialized through the blowing snow, a low, modular structure built to withstand the brutal Arctic conditions. Its dark windows stared back at us like empty eye sockets. No lights showed inside or outside the building. No smoke rose from the exhaust vents. The main entrance door hung partially open, banging rhythmically against its frame in the gusting wind. I held up my fist, and my team stopped in formation, each man dropping to one knee in the snow. We watched the station for long minutes, looking for any sign of movement or life. Nothing. "Thermal scan," I ordered. Wesley brought up his equipment, slowly sweeping the building from end to end. "Reading minimal heat signatures consistent with powered-down equipment," he reported. "No human thermal profiles detected from this distance." I nodded, processing this information while studying the station's exterior. The banging door was the only movement, an erratic, hollow sound that carried easily over the wind. "Approach pattern Alpha," I said. "McCarthy, comms, check one last time." Joel tried the radio again, broadcasting on the station's frequency. "Research Station Echo, this is U.S. Military Response Team. Do you copy?" "Over." Only static answered him. "Still nothing, sir," Joel confirmed, his expression grim behind his frosted scarf. I took one last look at my team, 5 of the best men I'd ever served with, all waiting for my command. Then I turned back toward the dark, silent station with its door banging open and closed like an invitation. "Move out," I ordered, and we advanced toward Research Station Echo through the howling Arctic storm. I pushed through the half-open door into Research Station Echo, my tactical light cutting through darkness that shouldn't have existed in an active facility. The beam caught swirling dust particles and scattered papers across the floor of the main corridor. Behind me, my team filed in silently, their own lights sweeping methodically across the walls and ceiling. "Emergency power should have kicked in," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the dead quiet of the station. "Something's wrong with the backup systems." Kingston moved up beside me, his light illuminating an open door swinging gently in the draft we'd created upon entering. "Place looks abandoned in a hurry, sir." I nodded, taking in the scene. The corridor stretched ahead about 30 feet before branching in 3 directions. Papers were strewn across the floor, some stuck to the walls with what looked like frost. Several doors along the hallway stood open, dark rectangles leading to unknown rooms. "Joel, check the communications room," I ordered. "See if you can figure out why they went dark. Jay, you're with me. We'll sweep the living quarters. Wesley, find the main power controls. Cameron, secure our entry point." "Yes, sir," came the chorus of responses as the team split up. I moved down the left branch of the corridor with Jay close behind, our boots echoing on the metal floor. The living quarters consisted of a shared dormitory space with 6 beds and several small private offices for the senior researchers. The temperature inside was well below freezing, not as cold as outside, but cold enough that our breath clouded heavily with each exhale. The dormitory door was ajar. I pushed it open with my gloved hand, revealing a room in disarray. The beds were unmade, blankets pulled back as if the occupants had left in a hurry. Personal items lay scattered, a paperback novel open and face down on a pillow, a framed photo of a family tipped over on a nightstand, a half-empty mug with frozen coffee on a small desk. "Looks like they left in the middle of the night," Jay said, examining a watch left on one of the beds. "Or were forced to," I added, moving toward a small adjoining bathroom. The door was partially open, and I pushed it with my foot, revealing nothing unusual except a towel on the floor and an open toiletry bag. We backed out and continued down the hall to the researchers' private offices. The first 2 were unremarkable, standard workspaces with desks, computers, and filing cabinets. The third office door had a nameplate reading Dr. Ana Rivera, Atmospheric Research Lead. Inside, her office was more personalized than the others. A small potted plant now frozen and dead on the windowsill, several framed academic certificates on the wall, and a desk cluttered with handwritten notes. What caught my attention immediately was her computer, still powered on despite the rest of the station being dark. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading from the top right corner, but it still displayed data, or what was left of it. I leaned closer, examining the corrupted information. The screen showed fragments of atmospheric readings, graphs with jagged lines, and partial text about anomalies detected in the upper atmosphere. Most of it was unreadable, either due to the screen damage or data corruption. "Captain," Jay called from behind me, "found something you should see." I turned away from the computer and followed Jay back to the main corridor and down the right branch toward what appeared to be the mess hall. The double doors were both wide open, and Jay's light was already illuminating the interior. "Jesus," I muttered as we stepped inside. The mess hall was a disaster. Tables were overturned, chairs scattered and broken, food trays lay on the floor amidst shattered dishes. But what grabbed my attention were the dark stains spread across the floor and splattered up one wall. Blood, frozen in place. Next to the largest stain were deep gouges in the metal wall panel, 4 parallel lines that looked like claw marks. Jay moved closer to the marks, holding his light at an angle to examine them. "These aren't from any polar bear or wolf I've ever seen. Too big, too deep. Whatever made these cut through quarter-inch steel like it was paper." I ran my gloved fingers along one of the gouges. "How many researchers were stationed here?" 6, according to the brief, Jay answered, his eyes still fixed on the claw marks. 2 atmospheric scientists, 2 ice core specialists, a station engineer, and a communications officer. My radio crackled. "Captain, this is Wesley. I've located the generator room." "Go ahead," I responded. "Sir, the main generator's been disabled. Not failed, disabled. Someone removed key components and damaged others. This was deliberate sabotage." I exchanged a look with Jay. "Are you certain?" "Positive, sir. The fuel lines were cut, control board smashed, and the backup batteries are missing entirely. Someone wanted this place dark." "Understood. Meet us back in the main corridor in 5 minutes." I switched channels. "Joel, any luck with communications?" "Negative, Captain." Joel's voice came through with a hint of frustration. "Equipment's intact, but completely dead. No power reaching this section at all. I found the station logs, though. Last entry was from 3 days ago, just a routine check-in. Nothing unusual noted. Kingston, Cameron, report. Entrance is secure, Cameron responded. No signs of forced entry from outside. Whatever happened, it started from within. I took one last look at the bloodstains and claw marks before heading back to the main corridor. The team was already assembling there, faces grim in the harsh glow of our tactical lights. "What are we dealing with here, sir?" Kingston asked, his rifle held at the ready. Before I could answer, a sound came from above us. A metallic scraping noise, like something heavy moving through the ventilation system that ran along the ceiling. We all looked up simultaneously, lights converging on the metal duct. The scraping stopped directly above where we stood. Kingston raised his rifle, aiming at the vent cover. I raised my hand, signaling him to hold fire. The last thing we needed was to start shooting blindly. We stood frozen, listening intently as seconds stretched into a full minute of silence. Then the scraping resumed, moving away from us down the corridor toward the laboratory wing at the far end of the station. The sound faded but remained audible. "Follow it," I ordered, moving forward with my weapon ready. Quietly. We proceeded down the corridor, following the intermittent scraping sounds until we reached a heavy metal door marked "Laboratory, Authorized Personnel Only." Unlike the other doors we'd encountered, this one was sealed shut. I tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. "Locked from the inside," I said quietly. The scraping noise had stopped. Whatever was moving through the ventilation system seemed to have reached its destination. "Cameron," I said, "can you get us through this door?" He nodded, already reaching for his pack. "Small-shaped charge should do it without damaging whatever's inside. Give me 2 minutes." As Cameron worked, the rest of us formed a semicircle around him, weapons trained on the door. The silence was complete now, not even the howl of the Arctic wind penetrating this deep into the station. "Charges set," Cameron whispered, connecting the detonator. "Ready when you are, Captain." I took a deep breath, wondering what waited for us on the other side. Everyone back. On my mark. We moved back several paces, taking cover where we could find it. 3, 2, 1, mark. The body lay sprawled across the lab floor, frozen in death. Dr. Lloyd Brown's face was locked in an expression of terror, his eyes wide open and glazed over with frost. The temperature in the lab had preserved him almost perfectly, except for the massive trauma to his chest. The cavity was torn open, ribs splayed outward like broken fingers reaching for help that never came. I knelt beside the corpse, careful not to disturb anything that might be evidence. The blood around him had frozen into dark crimson patches on the white tile floor. "Jesus," Jay whispered behind me. "What could do that to a person?" I shook my head, examining the wounds more closely. Nothing I've ever seen. These aren't knife wounds or gunshots. The flesh appeared to have been pulled apart rather than cut, with jagged tears instead of clean incisions. Kingston moved to the other side of the room, sweeping his light across the lab equipment. "The whole place is trashed. Looks like they were studying ice core samples." He pointed to several broken cylindrical containers. I turned my attention back to Brown's body and started checking his pockets. His skin felt like leather, stiff and unyielding from the cold. In his jacket pocket, my fingers closed around something solid, a small recording device, its surface stained with dried blood. "Found something," I said, holding it up. The others gathered around as I examined it. A standard voice recorder, military grade, designed to withstand extreme conditions. The kind of equipment you'd expect at a research station like this. I pressed play, hoping it still worked despite the blood and cold. Static crackled for a few seconds, then Dr. Brown's voice came through, tense and breathless. "Day 23 of the expedition. We've extracted something from the ice core at 2,000 feet. Not fossilized remains as we initially thought, but something else. It appears organic, but unlike anything in our taxonomic records. Anna thinks it might be a new extremophile species, but I'm not convinced. The cellular structure is wrong." We've brought a sample back to the lab for further analysis, but... A loud crash interrupted the recording, followed by shouting in the background. "What's happening? Anna, what?" Brown's voice rose in panic. "Oh God, it's moving. How is it?" His words dissolved into screaming, horrible and raw, before the recording cut off completely. I looked up at my team. Their faces reflected the same unease I felt. "Whatever they found, it wasn't friendly," Jay said, stating the obvious. A sudden crash from the corridor outside the lab made us all jump. I motioned for silence, drawing my weapon as I moved toward the door. The others followed, weapons ready. We entered the corridor cautiously, tactical lights cutting through the darkness. Our equipment bags, which we'd left stacked near the entrance, were torn open, contents scattered across the floor. Medical supplies, ration packs, spare ammunition, all strewn about as if something had rummaged through them. "What the hell?" Kingston whispered, kneeling to examine the mess. "We weren't gone more than 20 minutes. Could be an animal," Cameron suggested. "Polar bear, maybe? They can smell food from miles away." I shook my head. No tracks, and the door was secured. Besides, a bear wouldn't be this selective. I noticed that only certain items were missing, mainly food and some of our chemical heat packs. A movement caught the corner of my eye, something near the entrance. I turned quickly, raising my light toward the half-open door. For just a second, I saw it, a dark shape silhouetted against the white storm outside, larger than a man, with proportions that seemed wrong somehow. Its limbs were too long, too fluid in their movement. Then it was gone, slipping into the blizzard. "Did you see that?" I asked, already moving toward the entrance. Jay was right behind me. "Yeah, something big. Didn't move right." We reached the door and looked out into the swirling snow. Visibility was down to a few yards, the storm having intensified since our arrival. Whatever I'd seen had vanished completely. "What was it?" Joel asked from behind us. "Not sure," I replied, closing the door firmly and securing it. "But it wasn't human, and it wasn't a bear." Jay nodded in agreement. The way it moved, it was like it was shifting shape as it went. Never seen anything like it. I made a quick decision. "We need to establish a defensive position. Joel, see if you can get the radio working. We need to call for early extraction. The rest of you, help me secure this place. We'll use the communications room as our base. It's got one entrance and no windows." The team moved with practiced efficiency. We gathered our remaining supplies and relocated to the communications room near the center of the station. Joel immediately went to work on the radio equipment while Kingston and I barricaded the door with a heavy metal desk. Cameron and Jay took up positions at opposite corners of the room, weapons trained on the entrance. "How's it coming?" I asked Joel after he'd been working for about an hour. He shook his head in frustration. "Something's jamming all frequencies. I can get power to the system, but there's nothing but static on all bands." "Keep trying," I told him. "Our pickup isn't scheduled for another 48 hours. I'd rather not wait that long." Hours passed with nothing but the howling of the storm outside and the occasional static burst from Joel's radio attempts. The temperature in the station continued to drop as night fell. We used our remaining heat packs sparingly, knowing we might need them to last. I checked my watch. 2100 hours. "Cameron, take first watch at the door. 2-hour shifts, then wake Kingston. I want everyone to get some rest if possible." Cameron nodded and took up position by our makeshift barricade, rifle ready. The rest of us tried to make ourselves comfortable on the cold floor, using our packs as pillows. I must have dozed off because Cameron's scream jolted me awake. It was a sound I'd never heard from him before, raw terror mixed with pain, cut short in a wet gurgle. I was on my feet instantly, weapon drawn. "Cameron!" The others were up too, lights sweeping toward the door where Cameron had been posted. The barricade was still in place, but Cameron wasn't there. "Where is he?" Kingston demanded, voice tight with tension. A thump from the corridor outside drew our attention. I signaled for Jay to cover me as I moved the desk away from the door. With a nod to the others, I pulled the door open, weapon raised. Cameron lay just outside in the hallway, his throat torn open, blood pooling beneath him and already beginning to freeze on the cold floor. His eyes stared upward, empty and lifeless, his rifle still clutched in his rigid fingers. "Check the ceiling," I ordered, remembering the sounds we'd heard earlier from above. Jay and Kingston aimed their lights upward, revealing nothing but intact ceiling panels. Whatever had killed Cameron wasn't here now. "How did it get to him?" Joel asked, his voice shaking. The barricade wasn't moved. Before I could answer, the lights in the corridor flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. At the same moment, our backup generator hummed and died, plunging the entire station into total darkness. In the sudden blackness, I heard Jay chamber around in his rifle. "I don't like this, Captain." I switched on my tactical light, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The others did the same, our lights creating intersecting paths in the black void of the corridor. "Form a perimeter around Cameron's body," I ordered. "Back to back." Whatever did this could still be nearby. The four of us moved into position, our lights sweeping in all directions, revealing nothing but empty corridor and closed doors. The only sound was our breathing, visible as small clouds in the freezing air. Then I heard it, a soft scraping sound from somewhere in the darkness beyond our light beams. Something was moving out there, watching us. I heard Wesley firing his weapon in the darkness. The sound echoed off the metal walls, each shot lighting up the room in brief, strobing flashes that burned white spots into my vision. In those fractured moments of light, I caught glimpses of something impossible, a massive shape that moved like spilled oil across the floor and walls, flowing between solid and liquid states. "Wesley!" I shouted over the gunfire. "Fall back!" Another burst of fire illuminated the thing. It was darker than the shadows around it, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. As Wesley's rifle flashed again, I saw it flow up the wall like a living stain, stretching and reshaping itself. The shooting stopped abruptly. The silence hit harder than the gunfire had. "Wesley!" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the darkness. A wet, tearing sound answered me. Something heavy hit the floor with a thud. Then came a sound I'll never forget, like someone stirring thick mud, but wetter, meatier. "Everyone fall back to the generator room," I yelled, fumbling for the flares on my belt. My fingers felt thick and clumsy with cold and adrenaline. "Now!" I struck a flare against the wall. It sparked to life, bathing everything in harsh red light. The corridor ahead was empty, but behind us, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The wet sounds told me enough. "Move!" I pushed Joel ahead of me, holding the flare high. Jay was already running, his boots pounding on the metal floor. The flare sputtered and hissed in my hand, casting our shadows long and distorted on the walls. We ran through the twisting corridors of the station, the red light making everything look like it was covered in blood. The generator room door stood half open at the end of the hall. I shoved Joel through it, then turned to cover our retreat, holding the flare out like a weapon. The corridor behind us remained empty, but the darkness seemed to pulse and shift. I backed into the generator room and slammed the door shut, throwing the bolt. Kingston was already there, hunched over the main control panel, his face lit from below by the dim emergency lights. "I'm trying to restart the main generator," Kingston said without looking up. His voice was steady, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Something's jammed the fuel intake valve." Jay took up position by the door, rifle raised and ready. Joel moved to the emergency radio station in the corner, putting on headphones and working the dials with quick, practiced movements. "Any luck with comms?" I asked, moving toward Joel. He shook his head. "Nothing but static and..." He frowned, adjusting a dial. "Wait, I'm getting something weird." A sound from above made me look up. A ventilation grate was set into the ceiling, large enough for a man to crawl through. As I watched, a dark liquid began to seep through the slats, gathering in heavy drops before falling to the floor. "Kingston," I said quietly. "Step away from the panel." Kingston looked up, following my gaze to the ceiling. The color drained from his face. The black substance pooled on the floor, then began to rise, reshaping itself. It formed a vaguely humanoid shape, but wrong. Too many limbs sprouted from its torso, and what might have been a head had no features I could recognize. Glass shattered as the thing grew larger, breaking the light fixtures around it. In the strobing emergency lights, it looked like a stop-motion nightmare, each flash showing it in a new, more horrific configuration. I raised my rifle and opened fire. The bullets tore through the creature, leaving momentary holes that closed almost instantly, like fingers pushing through water. It didn't bleed, it didn't flinch. It just kept coming. "It's not stopping!" Jay shouted, adding his fire to mine. The creature lunged forward with impossible speed, flowing across the room toward Kingston. He tried to run, but dark tendrils shot out, wrapping around his legs and torso. Kingston screamed, a high, terrified sound that cut through the gunfire. The tendrils tightened, lifting him off the ground. I could see them sinking into his flesh, black against the red of his blood. I dropped my rifle and grabbed another flare from my belt, striking it against the wall. It flared to life, and I lunged forward, thrusting the burning magnesium directly into the mass of the creature. The effect was immediate. The thing recoiled, its form rippling and contracting away from the heat and light. The tendrils holding Kingston loosened, dropping him to the floor in a crumpled heap. The creature flowed back toward the ventilation shaft, squeezing through the grate with a sound like wet leather stretching. I rushed to Kingston's side. Deep lacerations covered his body, blood pooling beneath him on the metal floor. His eyes were open but unfocused, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Kingston, stay with me," I said, pressing my hands against the worst of the wounds on his chest. Blood welled between my fingers, hot and slick. "Joel, get the med kit." Joel scrambled for the emergency supplies while I tried to stop the bleeding. Kingston's lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes found mine, filled with pain and something worse, understanding. "You're going to be okay," I lied, applying more pressure. "Just hold on." Kingston coughed, blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, pulling me closer. "Burn it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It hates the heat." His grip loosened, hand falling away. I kept working, applying pressure, checking his pulse, but I knew it was useless. Minutes later, Kingston was gone, his eyes staring at nothing. I sat back on my heels, blood cooling on my hands. The room was silent except for our breathing and the static from the radio. "What the hell was that thing?" Jay asked, his voice hoarse. I checked my watch. 36 hours until extraction. "We need to get to the extraction point now," Jay said, moving to the window to look out at the storm. "We can't stay here." "In that?" I nodded toward the window where snow and ice lashed against the glass. "We'd freeze to death before we made it half a mile." Joel looked up from the radio, his face pale. "Guys, you need to hear this." He turned up the volume, and a voice crackled through the static, a woman's voice, tense with fear. "Anyone hear me? This is Dr. Anna Rivera at Research Station Echo. Something's gotten inside. Please send help immediately. It killed Marcus. The transmission cut to static, then returned. "Not human. I repeat, it's not..." The voice changed, becoming a man's. "This is Dr. Lloyd Brown. The specimen from the ice core is loose. It can..." Static again. "Mimicking us. Don't trust." Joel looked up at me. "These are the researchers. The dead researchers." "It's a recording," Jay said, but he didn't sound convinced. Joel shook his head. "No, these are live transmissions. Look at the frequency monitor. They're coming in real time." I moved to the radio, looking at the equipment. The signal strength meter was jumping with each voice. "Help us! It's in the walls! Please, anyone!" Different voices, all calling for help, all belonging to people we knew were dead. It's trying to mess with our heads, I said, turning down the volume. Whatever that thing is, it wants us scared. Well, it's working, Joel muttered, removing his headphones. What do we do now? I looked at Kingston's body, then at the ventilation grate where the creature had disappeared. We were trapped in a station with something that could move through walls, that bullets couldn't stop, and that could apparently mimic human voices. We need to find a way to kill it, I said, thinking of Kingston's last words. Or at least keep it away from us until extraction. And how exactly do we do that? Jay asked. I held up the spent flare. It doesn't like heat. Kingston was right about that. We need to find something hotter than these flares. Joel turned back to the radio, frowning as he adjusted the dials. The interference is getting worse. It's on all frequencies now. From the speaker, a chorus of voices called out, men and women, sometimes overlapping, all begging for help. And underneath them all, a sound that might have been laughter. I heard Cameron's voice coming from somewhere in the darkness of the corridor outside. Hey guys, you in there? I think I lost my way in the storm. Let me in. My hand shot out to grab Jay's arm as he stepped toward the door. His muscles tensed under my grip, ready to move. That's not Cameron, I whispered. Jay looked at me, confusion crossing his face for a split second before understanding dawned. He nodded and stepped back from the door, raising his rifle. Cameron's dead, I said, keeping my voice low enough that only Jay and Joel could hear. We all saw what happened to him. The voice came again, this time with a hint of desperation that sounded so real it made my skin crawl. Come on, guys. It's freezing out here. I can't feel my hands anymore. Joel pressed himself against the wall beside the communications equipment, eyes wide. It sounds exactly like him, he whispered. I know, I said. That's what makes it dangerous. We waited in silence. After a minute, the voice changed tactics. Hayden? Jay, I'm hurt. Please, I need help. The pleading in Cameron's voice, no, the thing using Cameron's voice, made Jay's jaw clench. I watched his finger tighten slightly on the trigger guard. We need a better position, I said, scanning the room. This place won't hold if that thing decides to come through the walls again. Joel pointed to a schematic of the station pinned to the wall, near his radio setup. Fuel storage is 2 corridors down, heavy metal doors, concrete walls instead of the modular panels. They built it that way for safety. Good, I said. Grab anything useful. We move in 30 seconds. While Joel packed up the emergency radio, I checked my remaining flares. 3 left, not enough. Jay kept his rifle trained on the door, his breathing steady despite everything. What's the plan once we get there? Jay asked. I thought about Kingston's last words. The creature hated heat. We're going to use what we have. The diesel fuel stored there. We'll use it as bait. Lure that thing in and burn it alive. Jay nodded. Better than waiting to die. Joel, you ready? I asked. He slung the radio pack over his shoulder. Ready. I took a deep breath. Jay, you take point. I'll cover our 6. Joel, stay between us. Move fast, stay tight, and don't stop for anything. Jay moved to the door, paused to listen, then pulled it open in one quick motion. The corridor was empty and silent. We moved out, keeping close to the wall. Every shadow seemed to pulse with potential threat. The first corridor was clear. We turned right at the junction, our footsteps echoing on the metal floor despite our attempts to move quietly. The temperature had dropped even further, and I could see our breath hanging in the air. 20 more feet, Joel whispered, pointing ahead to a heavy metal door with hazard markings. We reached the fuel storage room without incident, which only made me more uneasy. Jay pulled the door open while I covered him. Then we slipped inside. The room was larger than I expected, with rows of diesel barrels lining the walls and a small maintenance area in the back. Most importantly, the walls were solid concrete, and the door was thick steel with multiple locking mechanisms. "Secure that door," I ordered as soon as we were all inside. Jay slammed the heavy door shut and engaged the locks, 3 separate deadbolts and a crossbar. Joel set up his radio equipment on a small workbench while I examined the room. There was a maintenance hatch in the ceiling, a potential entry point for the creature, but it was small and had a secure latch. "This is as good as it's going to get," I said. "Jay, help me move these barrels to create a perimeter." We worked quickly, positioning the fuel barrels strategically around the room. If we needed to, we could open them and create a ring of fuel to trap the creature. "I'll take first watch," Jay said, positioning himself near the door with his rifle ready. "You two try to get some rest. We've got about 30 hours until extraction, assuming Mildred can even land in this storm." I nodded, though I doubted any of us would sleep. Joel sat with his back against the wall, fiddling with the radio dials and getting nothing but static. "You should try to rest too," I told him. Joel gave a humorless laugh. "Not sure I'll ever sleep again after what I've seen." I sat down against the opposite wall, keeping my flares within easy reach. The adrenaline that had been keeping me going was starting to ebb, leaving me aware of every ache in my body and the bone-deep cold that had settled in. "What do you think it is?" Joel asked quietly. I shook my head. "Nothing that should exist. Something that's been frozen in the ice for God knows how long. The ice cores they were drilling must have released it. And now it's hunting us." "Yes," I said simply. There was no point in sugarcoating it. Despite my certainty that sleep would be impossible, exhaustion eventually pulled me under. My dreams were filled with dark shapes and the sounds of my teammates screaming. I woke suddenly to the sound of Jay's rifle firing, 3 sharp cracks that echoed painfully in the enclosed space. I was on my feet before I was fully awake, hand reaching for my weapon. "It's coming through the maintenance hatch," Jay shouted, firing again at the ceiling. I looked up to see the hatch cover hanging open. Something dark and fluid was pouring through, but it looked different than before, more solid, with a defined shape. As it dropped to the floor, I caught a glimpse of rows of teeth in what might have been a mouth. Joel scrambled backward, knocking over his radio equipment. "Oh God," he repeated, his voice rising in panic. Jay kept firing until his magazine was empty. The creature paused, as if assessing the bullets hitting its mass, then surged forward with frightening speed. Before Jay could reload, a tendril shot out and wrapped around his ankle. "Hayden!" Jay screamed as the creature dragged him toward the darkness at the back of the room. I lunged for him, grabbing his outstretched hand, but the creature was too strong. It pulled Jay into the shadows, his screams cutting off abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. "Move!" I yelled at Joel, grabbing his arm and pulling him deeper into the storage area. "We need to get to the fuel barrels." We ran to the far end of the room where most of the barrels were stored. I immediately started opening the nearest one, using a wrench from the workbench to loosen the cap. "What are you doing?" Joel asked, his voice shaking. "Setting a trap," I said, tipping the barrel over. Diesel fuel spilled across the concrete floor, the strong smell filling the air. "Open those other barrels, spread it around." Joel moved to help, his hands trembling but functional. Together, we opened 4 more barrels and created a large pool of fuel across the center of the room. The creature was moving toward us slowly now, almost leisurely, as if it knew we had nowhere to go. Its form seemed to shift between solid and liquid states, but it maintained a vaguely humanoid shape with too many limbs. It was toying with us, savoring our fear. Joel's radio crackled to life on the floor where he'd dropped it. Wesley's voice came through the static, clear as day. "Help me. Please. I'm still alive. It's keeping me alive." I grabbed Joel's shoulder when I saw him look toward the radio. "That's not Wesley. Wesley's dead. It's trying to mess with our heads." The radio continued, cycling through voices. Kingston calling for backup, Cameron begging for help, Jay screaming in pain. Each voice was perfect, an exact match for my dead teammates. "It knows them. Joel whispered. "It's inside their heads, somehow." "Stay focused," I said, backing us up against the far wall. The creature had cut off our access to the door. Our only chance was to lure it into the fuel and ignite it. I pulled out my last flare, ready to strike it. The creature continued its slow advance, pushing us further back until we were pressed against the wall with nowhere left to go. Joel's nerve broke. With a strangled cry, he suddenly bolted, trying to run past the creature toward the door. "Joel, no," I shouted, but it was too late. The creature moved with impossible speed, tendrils shooting out to catch Joel mid-stride. I watched in horror as it lifted him off the ground. Joel's scream turned into a wet gurgle as the creature's form enveloped him. There was a sickening tearing sound, and then Joel went limp, blood spreading across the floor beneath him. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the flare in my hand, watching as the creature absorbed what remained of Joel. It turned its attention to me, the last survivor, and I knew I was looking at my own death. I struck the flare and dropped it into the diesel fuel. The liquid caught with a wet whoosh, flames racing across the concrete floor toward the creature. In seconds, the fire engulfed it completely. The thing made a sound. Not a roar or a scream. Something worse. Like metal being torn apart while someone played a recording of human screams backward. The pitch rose until my ears popped, and I felt something warm running down the sides of my neck. Blood. The creature thrashed in the flames, its body shifting between solid and liquid as parts of it burned away. Tendrils whipped out in all directions, smashing into fuel barrels and sending them toppling. More diesel spilled across the floor, feeding the growing inferno. I stumbled backward, feeling the heat sear my face even through my cold weather gear. The emergency exit was 10 feet behind me, a heavy metal door with a push bar. I turned and ran for it, lungs burning from the smoke already filling the room. The creature's shriek followed me, drilling into my skull. I hit the door with my shoulder, and the frigid air outside felt like a slap after the intense heat. The door swung shut behind me, cutting off the sound for a blessed moment. I took 3 steps into the blizzard before an explosion rocked the building, knocking me face first into the snow. The concussion rattled my teeth. I rolled over, watching as orange light bloomed behind the small reinforced windows of the fuel storage room. The secondary fuel tanks must have caught. Another explosion, bigger this time. Part of the station's roof collapsed inward. I needed to move. The wind cut through my gear like it wasn't even there. The temperature had to be at least 40 below, and the snow was coming down so thick I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. I pulled out my GPS unit with clumsy fingers, trying to shield the screen from the snow. The extraction coordinates were about 2 miles northeast. I started walking, head down against the wind. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind me, more explosions tore through the research station. The creature's screams had stopped, but I wasn't about to turn back to check if it was really dead. The snow came up past my knees in places. My legs burned with the effort of pushing through it, but the rest of me was going numb. Not good. I checked the GPS again. Still 1.5 miles to go. My mind drifted to the team. Cameron, Wesley, Kingston, Joel, Jay, all gone. Their faces flashed before me, alive 1 minute. Then, I pushed the thoughts away. Focus on the coordinates, 1 foot in front of the other. I don't know how long I walked. Time stopped making sense. The cold had worked its way into my bones, and my fingers had lost all feeling. The GPS slipped from my hand, and I fell to my knees trying to grab it. The snow felt almost warm. A bad sign. I knew I needed to get up, but my body didn't want to move. Just a quick rest, then I'd keep going. No, get up, now. I forced myself to my feet, retrieved the GPS and checked it again. 1 mile to go. I could make it. Had to make it. The station was just a distant glow behind me now. I hoped the fire had burned everything, the creature, the evidence, all of it. No one would believe what we found out here, what found us. I fell twice more as I trudged through the snow. Each time it got harder to stand back up. My eyelashes were freezing together, and I had to keep wiping at them to see the GPS screen. 3/4 of a mile, half a mile, a quarter. When I finally reached the extraction coordinates, I nearly missed them, just another patch of white in an endless sea of white. I checked the GPS 3 times to be sure. This was it. I dug into my pocket for the emergency beacon, my fingers so numb I could barely feel the device. I pressed the activation button and watched the small light start blinking. Red against the snow. Now, all I had to do was wait. I stamped my feet and swung my arms, trying to keep the blood flowing. The wind had picked up, driving the snow horizontally now. I checked my watch. How long would it take for Mildred to reach me? The extraction wasn't scheduled for another day, but the emergency beacon should bring her sooner. If she could fly in this weather, if she was even monitoring the frequency, if, hours passed, or maybe minutes. The cold messed with my sense of time. I paced back and forth to stay warm, but eventually my legs gave out, and I sat in the snow, huddled against the wind. I must have dozed off because the sound of helicopter rotors startled me awake. At first, I thought I was imagining it, the wind playing tricks, but then the sound grew louder, more distinct. I fumbled for my flashlight, waving it in wide arcs above my head. The helicopter noise grew louder still, and then a searchlight cut through the swirling snow, finding me in its beam. Mildred's Black Hawk descended slowly, the downwash from the rotors creating a temporary clearing in the blizzard. I staggered to my feet, waving my arms. The helicopter hovered about 10 feet off the ground, and the side door slid open. I lurched forward, half running, half crawling toward it. A figure leaned out, Catherine Rice, the medic. She reached down, and I grabbed her arm. With strength that surprised me, she hauled me up and into the cabin. The door slid shut, cutting off the howling wind. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the warmth. Catherine wrapped thermal blankets around me, her face tight with concern. "Jesus, Marquez, where's the rest of your team?" she asked, checking my pupils with a penlight. "Gone," I managed to say through chattering teeth. "All gone." "What happened?" She pressed a hot pack against the back of my neck. "The station was destroyed." My voice sounded strange in my ears, like it belonged to someone else. "Equipment failure, fire. We got separated in the storm." Catherine looked like she wanted to ask more questions, but instead focused on warming me up. She pulled off my frozen gloves and examined my fingers. "Minor frostbite. You got lucky." "Lucky? Right. Can you tell us what happened to the research team?" she asked, wrapping my hands in fresh thermal packs. I shook my head. "Found some bodies. The rest must have tried to evacuate. Got caught in the storm, probably." "And your team?" "We split up to search the station. When the fire started," I let the sentence hang there. It wasn't entirely a lie. Who would believe the truth anyway? A creature that could change shape, mimic voices, move through walls. They'd think the cold had driven me insane. Catherine nodded, not pushing further. She moved to check my feet, pulling off my boots and socks. "You'll keep all your toes. Again, lucky." The helicopter banked slightly, and I looked toward the cockpit. Mildred was focused on her instruments, flying through the storm with the same intensity I remembered from the insertion. I leaned back against the wall of the cabin, letting the warmth of the blankets seep into me. For the first time in what felt like days, I allowed myself to relax. We were flying away. It was over. 20 minutes into the flight, the radio crackled. At first, I thought it was just interference from the storm. Then I heard it, that same unearthly shriek that had made my ears bleed in the station. My whole body went rigid. Catherine looked up from her medical kit, frowning. What the hell was that? The radio crackled again, and Mildred's voice came through. "Base, this is Rescue 1. We're picking up an unusual radar signature over." A pause. Then the base responded. "Copy Rescue 1. Can you identify?" "Negative. It's matching our speed and course, about half a mile off our starboard side." I pulled myself up and moved to the small window, pressing my face against the cold glass. At first, I saw nothing but darkness and swirling snow. Then a shape emerged, darker than the night sky, moving with unnatural speed. It wasn't solid, more like a shadow given form, flowing through the air alongside us. It had survived. Somehow, it had survived the fire and followed me. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Mildred or the bass. It was Jay's voice. Hayden. Then Joel. Hayden. Kingston. Hayden. Wesley. Hayden. Cameron. Hayden. All of them speaking in perfect unison, their voices overlapping into a chorus that made my skin crawl. The creature was calling to me. I looked back out the window. The dark shape had moved closer to the helicopter, keeping pace effortlessly despite our speed. As I watched, it seemed to turn toward me, acknowledging that I could see it. The voices on the radio grew louder, all saying my name over and over. I watched Mildred push the Black Hawk to its limits. The engines whined in protest as we cut through the Arctic air, the vibrations rattling through my bones. Every few minutes, I pressed my face against the freezing window, searching for that dark shape I knew was out there. "Still with us?" Catherine asked, checking the thermal wraps around my hands. "Yeah." I pulled my gaze from the window. "How much longer?" "About an hour to Elmendorf," she said. "Your hands should start feeling better soon." I nodded, but my attention drifted back to the window. The dark shape maintained a perfect distance, never falling behind, never closing in, just watching, waiting. "Mildred," I called toward the cockpit. "Can we go any faster?" She didn't turn around, her focus locked on the controls. "Already redlining the engines, Captain. Any more, and we risk not making it at all." The radio crackled again with that unearthly sound, like metal being torn and twisted into something wrong. Catherine flinched. "What the hell is that interference?" she asked. I didn't answer. How could I explain that the thing making that noise had killed my entire team? That it was following us back to civilization? The realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just hunting me, it was following me home. "Mildred," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "When we land, I need to speak with Colonel Harrison immediately." "Already arranged," she called back. "Diao. He's waiting for the debrief." I leaned back against the helicopter's vibrating wall and closed my eyes. The voices of my team echoed in my head, not as they had been in life, but as the creature had mimicked them. Perfect copies, down to Jay's slight drawl and Joel's excited pitch. An hour later, we broke through the cloud cover, and I saw the lights of Elmendorf Air Force Base spread out below us. As we descended, I looked back one last time. The storm we'd escaped was visible on the horizon, a dark mass against the twilight sky. But the shape that had been following us was gone. For now. The debriefing room was too warm after the Arctic cold. I sat across from Colonel Harrison and Captain Stone, their faces grim as they studied the preliminary report I'd given Mildred during our flight. "Let me get this straight," Harrison said, tapping his finger on the paper. "Equipment failure led to a fire that destroyed the entire station?" "Yes, sir." I kept my voice flat, professional. "The main generator malfunctioned. When the backup failed to engage, the heating system went offline. We attempted repairs, but triggered a fuel leak that ignited." "And your team?" Captain Stone asked. I swallowed hard. "We got separated in the blizzard trying to reach the extraction point. I searched as long as I could, but..." I let my voice trail off, the lie bitter on my tongue. Harrison studied me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "That's quite a coincidence. First the research team goes silent, then your entire squad is lost. The Arctic doesn't forgive mistakes, sir." Stone leaned forward. "And you saw no signs of what happened to the research team?" "No, sir. The station was abandoned when we arrived. We found evidence of a hasty evacuation, but the fire destroyed any clues before we could piece together what happened." Harrison and Stone exchanged a look I couldn't read. "Very well," Harrison said finally. "This incident is now classified. You'll be debriefed by Dr. Gail Neal tomorrow morning for psychological evaluation. Sir, I'd prefer to return to active duty as soon as possible." "That's not an option, Captain Marquez. You've experienced severe trauma and exposure. Dr. Neal will determine when, if, you're fit to return to the field." I wanted to argue, but knew it would only make things worse. "Yes, sir." "Dismissed," Harrison said. "Report to medical for a full workup, then get some rest." I stood, saluted, and walked out, feeling their eyes on my back the entire way. Dr. Neal's office was minimalist: a desk, 2 chairs, and a small couch. No personal touches except for her degrees on the wall and a single plant by the window. She sat across from me, notepad in hand, her expression professionally neutral. "Captain Marquez, I'd like to discuss your experience at Research Station Echo." I repeated the story I'd told Harrison and Stone. Equipment failure, fire, team lost in the blizzard. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I see." She made a note. "And how are you processing the loss of your team?" "As well as can be expected." "Which means?" I looked away. They were good men. I was responsible for them. "Their deaths weren't your fault, Captain." I almost laughed. If only she knew. If I told her about the creature, about what really happened, I'd be sedated and locked in a psychiatric ward before sundown. "Captain Marquez," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Something happened out there that you're not telling me." I met her eyes. "With all due respect, Doctor, I've told you everything relevant to my psychological evaluation. I can't help you if you won't be honest with me." "I don't need help. I need to get back to work." She studied me for a long moment. "I'm recommending 2 weeks of rest, followed by further evaluation. We'll meet 3 times a week during that period." I nodded, knowing argument was pointless. "And Captain," she added as I stood to leave, "whatever you're holding back, it won't stay buried forever." If only she knew how right she was. The sessions with Dr. Neal continued for 2 weeks, then 3. Each time she probed deeper, looking for cracks in my story. I held firm until the day she showed me the recording device we'd found on Dr. Brown's body. "We recovered this from the wreckage," she said, placing it on the table between us. The data was partially corrupted, but our technicians managed to retrieve some audio. My heart pounded as she pressed play. Brown's voice filled the room, talking about the ice core samples, about finding something organic. Then the crash, his panic, his screams. "Would you like to revise your statement about what happened at the station?" Dr. Neal asked. I broke that day, told her everything: the creature, how it killed my team one by one, how it could mimic voices and change its shape, how bullets didn't stop it, but fire made it retreat. Dr. Neal listened without interruption, her face unreadable. When I finished, she called in Dr. Huang, the base psychiatrist. They spoke in low voices while I sat there, suddenly exhausted. Dr. Huang approached me with a sympathetic smile that never reached his eyes. "Captain Marquez, you're suffering from a severe case of PTSD combined with hypothermia-induced hallucinations. What you experienced was traumatic, and your mind has created this entity to explain the random tragedy of losing your team." "It wasn't a hallucination," I insisted. "It followed us in the helicopter. Ask Mildred about the radar signature." "We did," Dr. Neal said gently. "There was no unusual radar activity recorded during your extraction." That was when I realized they'd already decided I was crazy. And maybe part of me wanted to believe them, that it had all been in my head, that the creature wasn't real. Dr. Huang prescribed medication and daily therapy. When I refused both, he mentioned involuntary commitment as a possibility. I stopped talking about the creature after that. 3 days later, I received my medical discharge papers. PTSD. Unfit for duty. 3 weeks after the incident, I found myself in a small apartment in Anchorage. The military had arranged it as part of my separation package, a place to transition back to civilian life. Really, it was just somewhere to put the broken soldier who kept talking about monsters. The apartment was sparsely furnished: a bed, a couch, a small kitchen table with 2 chairs I never used. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors arguing most nights. It was almost comforting, that reminder of normal human problems. I spent my days staring at the walls and my nights trying not to sleep. When I did sleep, I dreamed of dark shapes flowing across white snow, of Jay's face as the creature dragged him away, of Joel's scream cut suddenly short. The medication they'd prescribed sat untouched on my bathroom counter. I didn't want to dull my senses. I needed to stay alert, to be ready. For what? I wasn't sure. Part of me still hoped the doctors were right, that it had all been in my head, that the creature had burned away in the station fire. But another part, the part that woke me sweating in the night, knew better. I kept my service weapon loaded and within reach at all times. The military had tried to take it, citing my mental state, but I'd convinced them I needed it for the sense of security. They'd relented, probably thinking it would help my recovery. I knew bullets wouldn't stop the creature, but the weight of the gun was comforting all the same. At night, when the building grew quiet, I heard it. Voices coming through the heating vents. Jay's voice asking why I left him behind. Joel's laugh cutting off abruptly. Kingston's distinctive whistle that he'd used to signal all clear during operations. I told myself it was just the pipes, just the wind, just my damaged mind playing tricks. But I kept the gun close anyway. I stood at my window, watching the street below. It was early October, too early for snow in Anchorage, but fat flakes had started falling an hour ago. The weather report on my phone showed clear skies. No precipitation expected. The snow swirled in patterns that didn't match the wind, forming eddies and spirals that seemed almost deliberate. In the gathering darkness, shadows moved between the streetlights, stretching and contracting in ways shadows shouldn't. My phone rang, making me jump. I picked it up from the table, my hand shaking slightly. The screen showed an unknown number with an area code I recognized. Arctic Circle, research station territory. I stared at the phone as it continued to ring, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Outside, the unnatural snow fell harder, and the shadows grew longer. I answered my phone without checking the caller ID. Stupid. The line crackled with static that made me pull the phone away from my ear. "Why did you leave us behind, Hayden?" Wesley's voice cut through the interference, flat and accusing. My stomach dropped. "Wesley," I whispered, even though I knew it couldn't be him. I'd watched him die. "You left us to die. You ran away while we suffered." His voice sounded exactly like I remembered. The precise, measured tone he always used when analyzing data. I hung up, my hand shaking. The phone rang again immediately. I switched it off and tossed it onto the couch. That's when I noticed my breath coming out in visible puffs. The temperature in my apartment had plummeted in seconds. I looked at the thermostat, 68 degrees, but it felt like freezing. Ice crystals spread across my windows like growing ferns, crackling as they expanded. "No," I said to the empty room. "No, no, no." A heavy thump came from above me, then another. Something large moved through the ventilation system, metal groaning under its weight. Dust fell from the ceiling vent as whatever was up there paused directly overhead. I grabbed my sidearm from the drawer beside my bed. My fingers were clumsy with cold as I checked that it was loaded. The military had let me keep my personal weapon after discharge. Small mercy. Another thump, closer to the vent now. The metal cover rattled in its frame. I backed toward the door, gun trained on the ceiling. The knob felt like ice when I grabbed it. I twisted hard, but it wouldn't budge. I looked down and saw frost had sealed it shut, ice spreading from the frame. The ventilation cover shook violently, screws loosening one by one. A black droplet oozed through the seam and hung there for a moment before falling to the floor with a wet splat. More followed, a steady drip becoming a stream. The substance pooled on my carpet, spreading outward like spilled oil. I fired 3 shots into the vent, the gunshots deafening in the small apartment. The black mass paused momentarily, then resumed flowing faster. It gathered itself, rising up from the floor, taking shape. The same shifting fluid form I'd seen at the research station. Not quite solid, not quite liquid. It towered nearly to the ceiling, its mass rippling and changing, forming limbs that weren't quite arms, appendages that had too many joints. I fired again, emptying my magazine into it. The bullets passed through with wet sounds, leaving holes that closed instantly. The lamp. I grabbed it from the side table, yanked the cord from the wall, and hurled it at the creature. The bulb shattered against its mass, sparks igniting the shade. A small fire bloomed where the lamp stuck to the thing's surface. It made that sound again, the backward scream that had haunted my dreams. It recoiled from the flames, parts of it burning away. I used the distraction to run to the window. The glass was covered in a thick layer of ice. I picked up a chair and smashed it against the window. Once, twice. On the third hit, the glass shattered outward. Cold air rushed in as I knocked away the remaining shards with the chair leg. I looked back. The creature had extinguished the small fire and was reforming, flowing toward me with purpose. I climbed through the window onto the fire escape, the metal so cold it burned my hands. Ice covered every surface, making the stairs treacherous. I started down, moving as fast as I dared. My foot slipped on the second landing. I fell hard, my back slamming against the railing. For a horrible moment, I thought I would go over the edge. My hand shot out, grabbing a support strut, stopping my slide. I got up, ribs aching, and continued down. Above me, the creature flowed out of my window, spreading across the brick wall like living paint. The streetlights flickered as I reached the bottom of the fire escape and dropped the last few feet to the pavement. One by one, the lights went out. Darkness spreading down the block. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. I looked back as I reached the driver's door. The creature poured down the side of the building, moving faster now, a dark cascade against the brick. It reached the ground and flowed across the street toward me, picking up speed. I got the door open, threw myself inside, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine caught on the first try. I floored the accelerator before I'd even closed the door properly, tires squealing as I pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I saw the creature reach the spot where my car had been parked. It reared up like a wave about to break, then collapsed back to the pavement as I sped down the empty street. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The car engine whined in protest as I pushed it well beyond what it was built for. Every few seconds, I checked the rearview mirror, expecting to see that dark shape flowing impossibly fast behind me. Come on, I muttered, weaving through the sparse late-night traffic. The military base was my only hope now, the only place with enough resources and firepower to handle what was coming. The car radio suddenly crackled to life, though I hadn't touched it. Static hissed through the speakers, then cleared. "Captain." Jay's voice came through, low and accusatory. "Why did you leave us?" I jabbed the power button, but the radio stayed on, cycling to another station. "You could have saved us," Wesley's voice whispered through the static. I slammed my fist against the radio. "You're not real." The stations continued changing on their own, each one playing nothing but static and the voices of my dead team members. Kingston's deep tone, Joel's higher pitch, Cameron's steady cadence, all of them talking over each other, calling my name, asking why I left them behind. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Harrison's number. He was the only one with enough authority to help me, the only one who might believe what was happening. The call went straight to voicemail. "Colonel Harrison, it's Hayden Marquez," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The thing from Research Station Echo. It followed me. It's not just in the Arctic anymore. It killed my team, and now it's here, hunting me. I'm heading to the base now. Please." My voice cracked. "Please. Be ready. This thing, it can look like anyone." I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The temperature inside the car had been dropping steadily despite the heater running full blast. My breath clouded in front of my face, and I noticed with alarm that ice crystals were forming along the edges of the dashboard. No, no, no. I looked in the rearview mirror again, and my heart nearly stopped. There it was, a dark, fluid shape moving along the road behind me, flowing faster than any vehicle could drive. It looked like an oil slick come to life, rippling and surging forward with unnatural speed. Shit! I yanked the wheel hard, taking a corner too fast. The tires lost traction on the increasingly icy road, and the car fishtailed wildly before I managed to straighten it out. The base was just ahead now. I could see the lights of the checkpoint. My tires skidded on a patch of black ice as I approached, and I nearly lost control again. The guards at the checkpoint had noticed my approach, their attention drawn by my speed and the sound of screeching tires. I slammed on the brakes as I reached the checkpoint, the car sliding to a halt just short of the barrier. Without waiting for them to approach, I threw open the door and stumbled out. "Let me in!" I screamed, waving my arms frantically. "It's coming! You need to let me in now!" Two guards approached with their weapons drawn, moving cautiously toward me. "Sir, I need you to calm down and show me some identification," one of them said, his rifle not quite pointed at me, but ready to be raised in an instant. "There's no time." I turned and pointed back down the road. "It's right." But there was nothing there. The road stretched empty behind me, dark and ordinary under the streetlights. No flowing black mass, no sign of pursuit at all. I turned back to the guards, seeing the look in their eyes shift from caution to concern. "Sir, are you under the influence of anything tonight?" the first guard asked, while the second one moved to flank me. "No. Listen to me. I'm Captain Hayden Marquez, Special Operations. I need to speak with Colonel Harrison immediately. This is a matter of national security." They exchanged glances. The first guard spoke into his radio, keeping his eyes on me. "We've got a situation at the main gate. Individual claiming to be Captain Marquez appears to be in some kind of distress." "I'm not in distress," I shouted, then realized how that sounded. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "Look, just check my ID. I have clearance." The second guard approached me carefully. "Sir, I'm going to need you to put your hands where I can see them while we sort this out." I complied, raising my hand slowly. "My wallet is in my back pocket. Military ID is inside." The guard carefully retrieved my wallet and checked my identification. After confirming who I was, his posture relaxed slightly, but he remained wary. "Captain Marquez, we're going to escort you to the base medical facility. You seem unwell." "I don't need medical. I need to see Harrison," I insisted, but they were already moving to either side of me, clearly intending to take me in. As they led me through the checkpoint and onto the base, I noticed something odd about the first guard's movements. They had become stiff, mechanical, as if he was having trouble coordinating his limbs. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. We walked past the administration building toward the medical center. The second guard was speaking into his radio again, requesting medical staff to be ready for our arrival. I watched the first guard from the corner of my eye. His gait was wrong, too fluid in some moments, too rigid in others. When the second guard looked away to check our path, I saw it happen. The first guard turned his head slightly toward me, and for just a second his eyes changed, the whites and irises disappearing into pools of absolute blackness before returning to normal. My blood ran cold. It had found a way in. It had found a way to hide. "Stop," I whispered, then louder. "Stop! That's not a guard!" The second guard looked confused. "Sir, you need to calm." I didn't wait for him to finish. I wrenched away from their grip and ran, sprinting toward the base commander's building. Behind me, I heard shouts and the crackle of radios calling for backup. "It's inside," I yelled to anyone who could hear me. The creature from the Arctic. It's here. It's taken one of your men." Military personnel turned to stare as I ran past. Some reached for their sidearms, others just looked bewildered. I didn't stop. I had to reach someone with enough authority to listen, someone who could help me contain this thing before it spread. "The guard at the checkpoint!" I shouted as I ran. "Check his eyes! It's not human!" I burst through the doors of the commander's building, immediately confronted by more security personnel responding to the alerts. They moved to intercept me, weapons raised. "Everyone is in danger," I screamed, desperate to make them understand before they took me down. "It can look like anyone. You have to listen to me." The last thing I saw before they tackled me to the ground was the first guard from the checkpoint walking calmly through the door, his movements now perfectly normal, his eyes fixed on me with cold, human intensity. I burst into the command center, my voice cutting through the room like a siren. "It's here! The creature followed me from the Arctic!" I shouted, struggling against the security personnel who had my arms pinned behind my back. "It can look like anyone. It's already inside the base." The soldiers holding me tightened their grip as I tried to wrench free. My eyes darted around the room, scanning the faces of military personnel who stared back with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Computer screens glowed blue against the stark walls, casting everyone in a cold light. "You need to listen to me," I yelled, my voice cracking from the strain. "It killed my entire team at Research Station Echo. It's not human." The main door opened, and Colonel Harrison walked in. His face remained impassive as he took in the scene, me restrained by 2 guards, disheveled and wild-eyed. He wore his dress uniform with perfect precision, not a metal out of place. "Captain Marquez," he said, his voice level. "I see you've made quite an entrance." "Colonel," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "The thing from the research station, it followed me here. It can look like anyone. It can mimic voices, appearances. It's already taken one of your guards." Harrison studied me for a long moment, his eyes revealing nothing. The room had gone quiet, except for the hum of computers and my ragged breathing. "Everyone out!" Harrison ordered suddenly. "Except you 2, he added, pointing to the guards holding me. "Keep the captain secure." The room cleared quickly, military personnel filing out with practiced efficiency. When the last person left and the door closed, Harrison turned to me again. "Now, Captain, tell me exactly what you saw." I took a deep breath. "The creature from Research Station Echo followed me here. It can change its shape, mimic human appearance. It killed my entire team. Wesley, Jay, Joel, Kingston, Cameron, all of them. And now it's here. I saw it take over one of your checkpoint guards. His eyes, they turned black for a second." Harrison walked to a computer terminal, typed something, then turned back to me. "And how do I know you're not the creature?" he asked quietly. The question hit me like a punch. You don't. But I wouldn't be warning you if I was. I'd be hiding, infiltrating. The thing wants to spread, to consume. It doesn't want to be caught." Harrison nodded slowly. "Fair point." He turned to the guards. "Release him." "Sir?" one guard questioned. I said, "Release him." They let go of my arms, and I rubbed my wrists where they'd been holding me. "You believe me?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. Harrison walked to a cabinet on the far wall, unlocked it with a key from his pocket, and pulled out a thick file folder. "You're not the first to report something like this, Captain," he said, placing the folder on the desk between us. "There have been similar incidents at other Arctic installations over the years, all classified, of course." I stared at him in disbelief. "You knew about these things?" "Not with certainty," Harrison replied, opening the folder. "Reports, rumors, unexplained disappearances. Nothing concrete enough to warrant a full investigation. Nothing anyone would believe without seeing it themselves." He looked up at me. "Until now." I leaned forward, looking at the papers, reports dating back decades, photos of other research stations, personnel files with red stamps marking them as deceased. "Why didn't you warn us?" I asked, anger rising in my voice. "Would you have believed me if I told you to watch out for a shape-shifting creature that can mimic human form?" Harrison asked. "Or would you have thought I was testing your psychological fitness for the mission?" I didn't answer. He was right. "What matters now is containing this thing," Harrison continued. "You said it's sensitive to heat?" "Yes. Fire hurt it back at the station. Kingston figured it out before he died." Harrison nodded. "Then we have a chance." He pressed a button on the desk intercom. "Curtis, come in here." A moment later, a man in his 40s with close-cropped gray hair entered. I recognized him as Curtis Skinner, the base's intelligence officer. "Sir," Skinner said, his eyes flickering toward me. "Curtis, we have a situation. I need the research wing cleared immediately and the thermal containment chamber prepped. Maximum heat capacity." Skinner didn't question the order. "Yes, sir. How soon?" 20 minutes. After Skinner left, Harrison turned back to me. "The research wing has a containment chamber designed for testing equipment in extreme conditions. It can generate temperatures up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit." "That should be hot enough," I said. "The question is how to lure it there." Harrison looked at me. "It's been following you specifically. You're the bait." I swallowed hard. "You want me to lead it into the chamber?" "Can you do that?" I thought about my team, their faces as they died one by one. "Yes, I can do it." Harrison outlined the plan. I would walk through the corridors to the research wing, hopefully drawing the creature's attention. Once inside the containment area, I would enter the chamber and exit through a maintenance hatch before Harrison sealed it and activated the heating system. "If this thing is as dangerous as you say, we can't risk it escaping," Harrison said. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Captain?" "I've seen what it can do," I replied. "We don't have a choice." 20 minutes later, I stood at the entrance to the east corridor that led to the research wing. The hallway stretched before me, empty and silent. The overhead lights cast alternating pools of brightness and shadow. "The wing is clear," Harrison's voice came through my earpiece. "All personnel have been evacuated under the guise of a chemical spill drill. The containment chamber is ready." "Copy that," I replied. My hand rested on the sidearm Harrison had given me, though I knew bullets wouldn't stop the creature. The weapon was merely a comfort, something solid to hold on to. "Remember, once you're inside the chamber, you'll have 15 seconds to exit through the maintenance hatch before the sealing mechanism activates. After that, there's no way out." "Understood." I took a deep breath and began walking down the corridor. My footsteps echoed against the polished floor. The air felt normal, the temperature regulated as in any military facility, but I knew that could change in an instant. "Talk to me, Marquez," Harrison said in my ear. "What should we be looking for?" "Temperature drop," I replied, keeping my voice low. "Lights might flicker. Electronics can malfunction when it's near." I passed through a set of double doors, entering a section with laboratories on either side. Glass windows showed empty workstations and dormant equipment. My reflection moved alongside me, a ghostly companion. "How's it looking?" Harrison asked. "Nothing yet," I began, then stopped. My breath clouded in front of my face. Temperatures dropping. The lights above me flickered once, twice, then stabilized. I kept moving, my pace steady despite the pounding of my heart. Another set of doors, ahead, marked the entrance to the containment area. "I'm approaching the containment section," I said. "I think it's following me." "Copy that. Containment chamber is prepped, door will be open." I pushed through the doors into a large room dominated by a circular metal chamber in the center. The chamber door stood open, revealing a sterile white interior. To the right, barely visible, was the small maintenance hatch I would use to escape. As I stepped toward the chamber, the overhead lights flickered violently, then went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow. The temperature plummeted, and my breath came out in white plumes. "It's here," I whispered into my comm. A dark mass oozed from a ventilation duct in the ceiling, pouring onto the floor like liquid shadow. It pooled there momentarily before rising up, forming a shape that was vaguely humanoid but wrong. Too many limbs, too fluid in its movements. In the red emergency lighting, it looked like a creature made of oil and darkness. It no longer bothered to disguise itself. It had no need to hide what it was from me. "Marquez. Status." Harrison's voice crackled in my ear. "Visual contact," I replied, backing slowly toward the chamber. "Sealing team ready?" "Affirmative. All exits secured. Get it in the chamber." The creature moved toward me, not walking, but flowing across the floor. It made a sound, not quite a voice, not quite static, that reminded me of the radio interference back at Research Station Echo. "You followed me all this way," I said to it, continuing to back up. "You want me? Come get me." The creature surged forward suddenly, faster than I expected. I turned and ran the last few steps into the chamber, hearing the thing right behind me. I spotted the maintenance hatch on the far wall and dove for it. The creature's tendrils wrapped around my ankle, cold as Arctic ice. I kicked hard, breaking free, and scrambled through the hatch just as Harrison's voice came through the comm. "Sealing now!" The maintenance hatch slammed shut automatically behind me, nearly catching my boot. I found myself in a narrow service corridor, breathing hard. Through a small reinforced glass window in the wall, I could see into the chamber. The creature thrashed inside as the door sealed with a heavy metallic clang. Red warning lights flashed around the perimeter of the chamber. "Heat activation in 3, 2, 1, Harrison counted down. The walls of the chamber began to glow, first dull red, then brighter, orange, yellow. The creature threw itself against the door, against the walls, tendrils lashing out in all directions. A horrible shrieking sound penetrated even the thick walls, making my ears hurt. I watched through the window as the creature's form began to break down. Parts of it burned away, turning to ash that swirled in the superheated air. It tried to maintain its shape, but more and more of it disintegrated until only a small dark mass remained in the center of the chamber, pulsing weakly. Then, with one final shriek, it collapsed entirely, leaving nothing but a black smear on the floor that quickly burned away to nothing. "Marquez, report." Harrison's voice came through my comm. "It's gone," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's over." I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I sat on the floor. Exhaustion washed over me, the adrenaline that had kept me going finally draining away. My hands shook as I ran them over my face. "Containment team moving in," Harrison reported. "Stay where you are." I nodded, though no one could see me. Through the window, the chamber glowed white-hot, empty now except for the memory of what had been inside. The nightmare that had followed me from the Arctic was finally over. My team was gone, but their deaths hadn't been in vain. The thing that killed them would never kill again. I closed my eyes and took the first deep breath I'd managed in what felt like weeks.